beggars believe.
Bernardo's is calling for schools to allow low-cost uniforms and for the government to include secondary school students in the free book scheme. 2/3 of secondary school students surveyed by the children's charity described back-to-school costs as worrying. CEO of the National Parents Council, Anya Lynch, said more schools need to end the practice of specific expensive uniforms.
We need to make sure that there's one generic uniform for all children in school. I think if there's more expensive options and cheaper options, that doesn't provide equality within the school for children.
And finally, tax revenue to the end of July was up 10% on the same period last year. Exchequer returns show the total tax take in the first 7 months of the year was just under 48 billion. A surplus of €700 million was recorded to the end of the month. And that's your news at 7:02.
News Talk weather.
Thanks to Ryanair. Best birthday present ever. Give a Ryanair gift card.
Scattered showers continuing tonight, although many areas will stay dry. Some clear spells for a time early on, but it'll become mostly cloudy again by morning. Lows of 11 to 13 degrees. Now you're up to date on News Talk.
The News Round on Off the Ball. This is News Talk.
Now then, you're welcome along. So we're busy this evening. We have lots going on. Wednesday night rugby amongst the pieces back. That time of year, Ireland play Italy, 8 o'clock kickoff at the Aviva Stadium. So Fiona Hayes and Rory O'Connor will join us. We'll be talking about the US soccer team over at the World Cup who are struggling, it seems, and they're against Sweden in the round of 16, and they've gone from being the team to beat to looking very, very vulnerable. So we'll be crossing over stateside to hear about that. And then I guess we knew it was coming, but Katie Taylor is once again going to get into the ring. It's going to be on November the 25th against Chantel Cameron for a rematch. So Gavin Casey's going to join us to chat about the ramifications there. Michael McCarthy here in the studio. Hello.
How are you, Joe?
53106, the text number. We're at Off the Ball on Twitter. We have Richie McCormack with us as ever. Hello to you.
Gentlemen, how are you?
Very well. So Ireland, Italy, 8 o'clock Saturday evening. I always imagine these warm-up games as middle of the day, no atmosphere, but they're going for 8 o'clock. I don't think
I actually, do you know what, when you said the time
out
there, it was exactly my thought.
Yeah.
Was that there's something about the, it's always mid-afternoon.
Yeah.
I remember Ireland playing France away somewhere in the south of France one summer, and that was an evening game, and it was much better. It was the most memorable warm-up game that I can remember, purely because of that Ireland wore a white jersey that night.
Yeah.
But other than that, I remember they all blend into each other as being, these are annoying games in my memory.
The worst. So they play Italy on Saturday 8 o'clock, then they go off to Portugal for a week, which right now sounds like a bloody nice idea, this weather.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, once it's cooled down a little bit in the
Portugal was okay, no?
Region, was it? It was always okay.
I don't know. I mean, I guess
it never made the headlines. Let's face it.
Yeah, Greece has
gets more of an Atlantic breeze.
Yeah. So they'll dodge what I'm presuming next week will be 7 days straight of rain.
It usually is, yeah.
I've stopped checking the weather. I just know it's going to rain.
I don't always bringing my kids into things, but it's a very good way of measuring how bad things are in terms of the weather, because I have a 1-year-old who's learning to talk, and at the moment his word for rain is rain again.
Yes.
That's so he looks out the window and goes, rain again.
And when you're that age and the summer's a long time, it must feel like it's the equivalent to us of raining for 5 or 6 years in that kid's life.
Yeah. He doesn't know that it's crap yet, though.
Okay.
I'd
say he's a fair idea somehow. Everybody's
oh my
miserable.
God, it's absolutely miserable. Never stops.
Yeah. Richie had, working from home, he'd planned a summer out the back garden. He had thought he was going to be a bronzed Adonis by now. You're sitting in there miserable as us.
I am, yeah. I still have the shorts on because you don't, there's no point in going out in the rain wearing trousers because your lower leg is just going to become soaked. So you might as well just have them being readily wipeable. But no, the back garden is falling into disrepair because the weather has been cat melogian for the last few weeks. We're into was it the summer of 2007 where it incessantly rained?
That was the worst one.
People were blaming the summer of Rihanna for her cursing that summer by releasing Umbrella, and then it piddled down for 2 months.
Garden's in bits. He's dead right.
What are we blaming?
Garden is in bits. Can't keep it. It's just there's no looking after it in this weather,
As in cutting the grass.
Well, I don't even really have grass. It's just the weeding and the kind of the sort of just keeping it looking
its best.
Yeah.
And would you be a good man to go out and weed?
I just have to do it every now and then,
Okay.
Just it's part of the job.
Yeah, well, the Irish rugby team will be in Portugal, and then they come back and they play England, and then they go to Biarritz for another week.
Oh, nice, yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
Jeez.
As far as I'm not sure, I still think I'd sit here like talking about sport in the rain rather than getting like pre-season training for a World Cup and getting like lads running into you.
Well, maybe. I mean, they're built for it. They don't even feel it, you know. It was interesting. Paul O'Connell was comparing in his press conference yesterday the difference in preparation. He was obviously there from 03 World Cup to 15, and he was talking about in the early days it was just running. You'd run yourself into the ground. You don't think about anything, do anything. He said you just run, and then you move on to conditioning. And he says what it's moved on to now in 2023 is lots of ball in hand and lots of matches with different constraints on them to make it either easier to break down a defence or harder, different scenarios. All that stuff is where they are. The 07 team, I feel, just went to the gym for 6 months that summer.
Felt like that was the era. All right, yeah.
Gym and past.
Early skin tight jerseys as well, don't forget. You know, they had to kind of like, when you think of that really dark green jersey, you think of like Jerry Flannery being like, you know, it just wrapped around his arms, you know, and you think, geez, rugby players didn't used to look like that. But I think those days are slightly past.
Yeah, it did seem that way. Rory O'Connor and Fiona Hayes will explain all after 8 o'clock. Gavin Casey is with us this hour. It's your first story, Richie, so we have the date.
Yeah, we do. Katie Taylor's rematch with Chantel Cameron has been confirmed today for Dublin's 3 Arena on November the 25th. Cameron's undisputed super lightweight titles will once again be on the line, but Taylor's lightweight titles won't. She inflicted a first career defeat upon Katie Taylor when they first squared off at the same venue back in May.
So I know boxers tend to talk a good game in advance, but the early word from Cameron, going into November 25th, I'm more prepared this time. I know what it feels like now, and I'm going to go in there with more aggression, more energy. I'm confident I'll get the job done in better fashion. I'm going to be a lot better this rematch. In the gym, we're correcting the mistakes I made last time. I think I'm all wrong for Katie.
That's ominous. She was pretty good the last time, I thought. Yeah, look, I mean, I was saying this only a couple of weeks ago when we thought this fight was whatever level of confirmation we were at a couple of weeks ago, that I do think Katie will be better as well, and she's someone that like we really do have to be wary of writing off. And you know, every time she's been asked the question in the past, she's come up to it. But you know, I think Chantel Cameron is possibly, I do think a lot of the analysis of the last fight and even in the build-up, and you know, you're talking to Gavin Casey, he was one of the ones who was saying it to us on the show beforehand when we didn't want to listen, is that she is not the opponent that suits Katie Taylor in terms of styles, and that's going to be no different this time. And if she's all the more doubly motivated and so on, then that doesn't bode well. But
yeah,
wouldn't rule out Katie for sure.
No, you couldn't, I suppose. Gavin Casey with us this hour to chat through boxing.
Just to make things more fun on that one as well, it also clashes with another Leinster date in the Aviva. So Leinster are playing Munster that evening in the URC. So much like the Champions Cup final being on the same night as the original fight, there's another Aviva date for attendees to contend with in terms of accommodation and celebration and all that goes around with it.
Okay.
Kind of crazy.
Yeah. Well, I guess there's always a Leinster match on in November, so you know, your odds were good.
Leinster Munster at the Aviva though.
There is that. It's a touch more high profile, I'll give you that. So the FAI have been talking, Rich?
Yeah, they released a statement today saying they'll undertake a full and comprehensive review of the Republic of Ireland's World Cup campaign. It's likely that review will include discussions regarding the future of manager Vera Pauw. Pauw and her squad arrived back into Dublin Airport today with an official homecoming planned for O'Connell Street tomorrow evening. Defender Niamh Fahey, meanwhile, is considering her international future. The Liverpool captain says if she does retire from the international game now, she couldn't pick a better time.
We never get much info on what the review will entail.
It's full and comprehensive.
Yeah.
It will entail everything.
So we're not going to tell you how it's been done, and we're not going to publish it, but it's being done, trust us. I understand them not being able to publish it.
Come here, I'm sure they were just asked and answered, and there's a review scheduled for every World Cup ever, but doesn't a full and we will undertake a full and comprehensive review suggest negativity? Where there might not even be. I don't mean it suggested that it is necessarily. It's just it feels from the outside. I suppose you look at the perception is that it's negative. You know, there
was a stark nature to the email as well because it just came in under the title FAI statement, and it started off with mentioning looking forward to welcoming the team home with the official homecoming. Now they released a separate press release last night talking about that anyway. So that wasn't news. But the fact that this full and comprehensive review suddenly got tacked on at the end does seem to be news. And if you are Vera Pauw, it does appear to be ominous as regards what's coming.
Okay. There was a shock today.
Certainly was. Probably a couple of them. Jamaica helped cause one of the shocks of the World Cup by dumping Brazil out of the competition today. The sides played out a goalless draw in Melbourne, which was enough for Jamaica to progress to the last 16 as Group F runners-up. That game was Brazilian legend Marta's last for her country, having played at 6 World Cups and won 174 caps. Jamaica boss Lauren Donaldson hopes their progress can inspire more investment in the women's game back home.
It's the little things. We still don't have the big things. Because most of the time we can't find a place to train, to practice. We have to search hard. The big countries will have this and big, good facilities to train. We don't unless we travel. So that's still going to be there unless, our federation or the government put it in. Good thing we have somebody like Acidella Marley, who I think will do something for Jamaica, but I would like to see the rest of the countries, the 80s of the world, and some of these countries get the same thing. We don't have it yet. I'm just hoping that, maybe Jamaica do something and people say, oh, if Jamaica can do it, we can do it. So the big country will still have the stuff because they have the money. We're not going to get the money. From the big sponsorship, whether it's Adidas or Nike or whatever it is, they're going to give them more money than they give us. Okay, what we get from, from these sponsorship, it's a pittance compared to what they will give a bigger country. So we have to just keep plugging away.
Yeah, I it's an interesting perspective he's got, but I do find the overall thing of Jamaica being able to compete with Brazil and ultimately knocking them out of the World Cup, it'd be such a shock, obviously, in the men's game, but in the women's game, which is still a developing sport in many ways, you expect the big nations to just have that natural head start and to be, and fair enough, maybe there's a culture thing, say in North America, that might be different than the rest of the world, America and Canada. Maybe that goes into Jamaica somewhat, but you would expect, just because we're at this stage of development with the game, that someone like Brazil would just be naturally strong, and then maybe that changes over time as the game gets bigger and bigger. So I think it's interesting that Brazil and Argentina both went out today, and it does suggest to me that is the case in Europe. The strong nations are England and Germany and Spain and the Netherlands, but in South America that's obviously not the case, and it just does show you that there's probably just such a lack of emphasis on the women's game, and there might be maybe some old school attitudes and kind of a machismo element to it that it isn't an encouraged thing. And I think that's something that I presume FIFA will be looking at in a kind of not a worried way, but I would say they will want South American teams to be a part of this story as it gets bigger and bigger. Yeah.
France did their thing today, Richie?
Yeah, they did. They finished top of Group F following a 6-3 win over Panama. While an injury time goal saw South Africa beat Italy to qualify for the second round as Group G runners-up. They'll play the Netherlands in Sydney on Sunday. Sweden were confirmed as the United States' last 16 opponents with their 2-0 defeat of Argentina, seeing them come out on top of their group. South Africa manager Desiree Ellis was overjoyed by her team's efforts today.
This is for everyone, and I said I want them to go to work smiling in their cars because we know the game started at 9 a.m. This is for all the coaches out there in the league that have played their part. This is for the coaches that have come before. This is for everybody involved in women's football because they have played their part, the players that have come before. I remember when we won WAFCON, Amanda Dlamini said to me, it's personal, and it is personal. This is for everyone that has put in, but this is more so for the players who have really, really put the work in, who have really, really worked so hard. And yesterday I said to you about the breadwinner, and the breadwinner came through today for us. And it shows the warriors that these players are. It shows the resilience that they have. And tonight I said we gave everything against Sweden, we gave everything against Argentina, but we've got to give more. We've got to give more because it's about how badly do you want this, and they wanted it so bad.
Rich mentioned USA-Sweden on Sunday in Melbourne. We're going to talk to Sandra Herrera of CBS later on about the US team. They obviously arrived pre-tournament as favourites, team to beat, going for an unprecedented 3 in a row. and they've been decidedly average, especially in front of goal. Their last 2 matches, they managed 1 goal against the Dutch in a draw, and then a dismal showing against Portugal yesterday, 0-0 draw. Portugal hit the post late on. It could have actually sent the US out of the competition, and so they're not quite sure what's going wrong, but something's going wrong, and we'll chat to Sandra about that. But there's a distinct possibility they'll struggle against Sweden and get out of the tournament.
It's some match for the first knockout round, isn't it? Like, that should actually get people seriously into the tournament from a neutral's point of view. Obviously we've had our eye on Ireland, but now it's like there are teams to watch as we get into the knockouts, and Sweden, who we obviously know very well, and America is some match. And like, I don't know, Richie, you probably have looked at this more than I have, but like, it would seem to me on form alone, Sweden would be favourites in that game regardless of where America started the tournament.
Absolutely should be. Sweden have been
dominant,
really, really calm and composed throughout the entire 3 games that they've had so far, that don't really appear ruffled by anything that they've featured so far. Now granted, the United States are going to be a step up from what they've come through in their group already, but like I mentioned last night, and I'll say it again today, US have been so flat and so lacking, and they have been so blunt up top that you would worry if you're a United States fan. But there is a muscle memory that goes along with being in these kind of competitions and being in the latter stages of them so frequently, like they have been, and winning them like they have been over the course of the last decade. So I wouldn't necessarily write them off. Like, it is going to be probably the tie of the second round, and mightn't even be close. But I wouldn't discount America completely, because if they do click, by God, there'll be other teams, and a lot of teams in that competition will be in trouble if they do.
Yeah. Well, we'll chat about it later on in the show. Next, Richie, you got swimming for us? Yeah,
Nicole Turner and Barry McClements are both gunning for medals tonight at the Paris Swimming World Championships. Turner competes in the women's 200 metre individual medley S6 final. That will be the next race in the pool in Manchester, while McClements set a new personal best in this morning's 100 metre butterfly heats, and his final is due in the pool at 20-9 in Manchester, but they are running behind time already, so they'll be probably closer to 9 o'clock or just about after it.
I would, by the way, recommend on the swimming theme our interview yesterday with Daniel Whiffen, 22 years of age, 4th in 2 World Championship finals, and really gunning for a medal at the Olympics next year.
Gold.
Maybe, yeah, very possibly. We hadn't spoken to him before.
No.
Bit of a star.
He's a bit of crack, isn't he?
Yeah.
I think it was one point, it was like, if you study the game, who's got the best swimming stroke in swimming at the moment?
Years, yeah. Of the last 20 years.
Of the last 20 years, sorry. Okay, yeah. So including Michael Phelps.
Yeah, including them all. Because Daniel's a student of the sport. Yeah. So he understands perfect technique.
His answer?
He said, I think mine is the best of the last 20 years.
He was brilliant. There was such a refreshing, I don't know if honesty or if he is just having a bit of fun.
No, I think it was honesty. Because we asked, like, did you have posters of Phelps up in your room? Like, were you that kind of kid? He's like, no, I have posters of myself up in the room. Again, he didn't mean it as a joke. He just obviously had posters of himself swimming up and thinks he's the best swimming stroke of the last 20 years. And who am I to disagree with that? He knows more than I do. So I'd give it a mention as worth checking out, Daniel Whiffen, and he could become a very big figure in Irish sport over the next 12 months.
Off the Ball daily feed, if you're looking it up.
Very good. So, news on Offaly footballer. Not Offaly footballer, Offaly football manager.
Well, yeah, the footballers need a new manager because Martin Murphy has decided to step down. He was promoted from his role as selector following the sudden death of Liam Kearns in March. Murphy guided Offaly to a Leinster Championship win over Meath, only losing their provincial semi-final to Louth after extra time. But they had a disappointing Talton Cup campaign, and he'd been asked to stay on for 2024 by Michael Dignan, but declined due to circumstances he described as being beyond his control.
Text in, lads, really enjoyed the GA chat last night. More of that, please. Sean in Selbridge. Yeah, I guess we'll try and keep doing more GAA. I guess it's tricky now. The inter-county season is over. We had Maurice Brosnan from the Irish Examiner, Mick Foley from the Sunday Times, and Colm Keys from the Irish Independent, just reviewing the men's football championship senior season that was. A really good chat. I guess what jumped out as we went on in part 2 was I don't think none of the lads would be prone to sensationalism by any means, and yet they all really feel that the game, the style of football that we're seeing, is in a very serious situation. And so, like Mick Foley said, I think direct action needs to be taken now. It's that bad in too many games.
Yeah, so much so that Colm Keys said that 13 men aside or less people on the pitch is the way forward, which is like, that sounds drastic in itself, but when you consider, like, every time we talk about rule changes, there is a kind of a pushback in unintended consequences. Let's not worry too much about rule changes. We need and it's like, these boys would be among the most thoughtful and would be considering all the unintended consequences, and to yet still suggest that shows that there is a real issue. And I think you put your finger on it, Joe, and look, we could talk about it. It's like, I'll always have an interest in the game, and something like Dublin Kerry or whatever will always grip me and will always bring me along. But it doesn't change the fact that, like yourself and like you mentioned last night, for most of the season I was watching games bored. And that doesn't mean that I don't understand it, and it doesn't mean that I'm not a realist and I don't understand why teams need to play defensively. But it doesn't change the fact that I'm not entertained or enjoying watching this sport at the moment, for the most part. It doesn't mean it's every game.
Yeah, I was quite struck because the lads obviously adore their GAA, they're immersed in it. I fully expected, when I asked the question about style of play and the complaints this year, I thought they would say it's no worse than many other seasons. I was quite struck by the fact that they all were in agreement that it's not in a good place, and made the point that ironically players are now in the main 2-footed, brilliant handling skills, fitness off the charts, incredibly organised as a team, which is in part the problem. The coaching is so thorough now, the teams are so organised, you don't see as many mistakes, which again is to all the players and management credit. But the ironic point is it makes the spectacle far too often just a little dead.
Yeah, no doubt. And not to rehash it completely, but I thought one of the more interesting points that Maurice Brosnan was talking about was that, we so often kind of say it's hand passing, let's ban hand passing. Things are just so far beyond that. He was saying that in the 6 minutes that Roscommon had the ball, it was basically a ratio of 1-to-1 for hand passing and foot passing.
I meant to check actually how many of those kicks were forward. I'd say very few. Yeah,
but our solutions are so 10 years ago, I think, as well. You know what I mean? So much has changed in the culture of how teams play. Look, I think we saw in some ways, even though it wasn't like the highest quality and so on, I think we saw in terms of intention, we saw the best of it at the weekend. We still saw a little bit of lateral play from Kerry, I would say, but nothing extreme, nothing that kind of brought the game down. Dublin were very direct, and it can still be played like that. And they're the two teams in the All-Ireland final, and that's what I don't understand, is how it seems to be that there's a limit of mediocrity of maybe Division 1 top 8 kind of level that can be achieved by that style of football, but yet it is still what so many strive for.
There were definitely lots of games where we saw an attacking verve. Derry took the game to Kerry in an unexpected way, and it made for maybe the game of the championship. I thought Derry-Kerry was great.
And the most pre-maligned game of the season as well, and it was nearly the best game.
Well, exactly. Yeah. And obviously Dublin Mayo, very direct, kick passing in. But it's very easy for us to sit here and look at it from our perspective. I mean, if you're coaching a team, you're staying in the game, you're being as competitive as possible, you're not doing anything wrong whatsoever. So it's difficult to suddenly impose a new set of rules and just for our entertainment. And we'll see how it goes for a year or two, and they might be the most important year or two of your career, and we're just playing around with it in the hope that we get something a bit more exciting. So you have to tread very carefully.
Innovation will bring it on, though. It's that's what I'm saying. Maybe we need rule change, maybe we don't, but look at football in 2005 when it was Benitez versus Mourinho in the Champions League, and you couldn't bear to watch another game, and then Pep comes along and things gradually change, and suddenly attacking football is far more important than defensive, and pressing and so on, which Gaelic football needs in abundance, especially at the moment, becomes the order of the day. So you just have to trust that evolution will happen, and maybe we don't need too much hand wringing, but at the same time it's I'm sick waiting for it to happen.
As a last thought, Maurice Brosnan said one of the rule changes could be that the tackle could become like it is in Aussie rules. And then,
he said that was an extreme example.
I know, it's an extreme one, but then the logic being, well, then you would see teams really press. If you knew you could run over to Richie, wrap your arms around and throw him on the ground, and then I'm
sure I'd manage.
Yeah, well, we could both go over. We'd double team him.
Then great pleasure as well.
Then you would see a fair degree of improvement in the pressing front. I don't know. We're not going to sort it out in the midst of a news round. We'll push on, Richie. So, familiar face back in Dundalk.
Daryl Horgan says he was like a kid at Christmas when he had the chance to rejoin Dundalk. The Republic of Ireland winger has returned to Oriel Park 6 years after initially leaving for Preston. He was released by Wickham at the end of the last English season, the second half of which he spent on loan at Stevenage. Horgan won 3 league titles and an FAI Cup during his first spell at Dundalk.
Yeah, so
won 17 caps in his time away. It's like one of those like very good careers, you know. But I think it's nice to see him back, and it's nice that someone is properly associated with a League of Ireland club when they come back like this. I would still say, for most people listening, for me certainly, my best memories of Daryl Horgan are playing for Dundalk.
Yeah,
and that's not always the case with someone who goes away and becomes an international.
Yeah, it's true. Last couple of stories, Rich.
Yeah, staying at home, Sligo Rovers' Danny Lafferty has had his 6-match suspension cut down to 4 matches following his red card in Sligo's FAI Cup defeat to Drogheda. Shamrock Rovers manager Stephen Bradley has all but conceded their Conference League qualifier with Ferencváros. They'll resume 4-0 down tomorrow night after a disastrous trip to Budapest. Bradley says he'll have an eye on their weekend meeting with Cork City when he names his team tomorrow. Meanwhile, Drogheda manager Kevin Doherty has turned down the chance to manage Cork City. And Manchester City have agreed a €90 million fee with RB Leipzig for Joško Gvardiol. The Croatian defender is to have a medical in England before the weekend. Gvardiol's move will make him the most expensive defender of all time. And Gianluigi Buffon, the Italian goalkeeping legend, has confirmed his retirement at the age of 45. He won the World Cup with Italy, of course, in 2006. 10, count them, Serie A titles at Juventus and the UEFA Cup with Parma. It's believed he is quitting to take up a position with the Italian Football Federation. He did have 1 year remaining on his contract with Parma, to whom he had returned a year or so ago.
Parma gave him a 2-year contract at 44 years old.
And I'd say it worked out fine.
Yeah.
What a career. My goodness. 45.
Unbelievable. Like, I mean, can Stephen Cluxton get past Buffon's age and still be winning All Irelands with the Dubs? Yes is of course the answer, but it doesn't take anything away from Buffon's achievements.
No. What's Cluxton, 42 next year?
Yeah.
Yeah. Saunter past 45. Yeah.
Another 6 in a row.
Yeah. We are pretty much out of time. Richie, thank you very much.
5th for Nicole Turner, by the way, in that final, so she's narrowly missed out on a medal there in Manchester, and Barry McClellan's still to come. But thank you. Yeah,
thank you, Michael McCarthy. Cheers. Cheers.
Your chance to win big.
News Talk's Summer Cash Machine.
Cash Machine Reloaded, the new amendment